Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Viaka Podcast. This is where we bring you conversations with inspiring founders, investors, and builders who have ties to the MENA region, who are making waves in the entrepreneurship space and around the world. A little bit before we dive into today's episode, a quick word about Viaka. So we're a global platform that scouts, invests, and supports exceptional MENA-connected founders. Through our angel network of over 80 active investors, we've backed 10 companies since launching in March of 2025, deploying close to $600,000 alongside leading US investors. We've democratized early stage investing with checks as low as $1,000, making it accessible for operators and professionals who want to back world-class talent. So if you're interested in joining, visit viaka.net or email hello@viaka.net. Today's guest is Lina Ismail, a Canadian entrepreneur and investor who has spent her career at the intersection of innovation, growth, and financial services after holding executive roles at Citigroup, Fundserv, and Larsen and Toubro Infotech. She co-founded the Catherine Wheel, a firm dedicated to helping startups scale. She's now the CEO and co-founder of Prospera AI, which is on a mission to deliver quality financial advice to the masses. They believe financial advice should be delivered by financial advisors, and they're building the tools to empower advisors to serve all the clients like they're the very best clients, like their very best clients. Lina, welcome to the Viaka Podcast.
Thank you, Ramsey. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being here. Before maybe we get into Prosper AI, what you're doing today, maybe, tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how did that shape who you are today?
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to. By the way, love what Vika's doing and what you're also creating here. So thanks for doing that and having me. As part of, my background, I grew up in Toronto, Canada. So in a suburb, Mississauga. And, I would say my overall childhood was great. It was an interesting time because I think, at that point for me, there weren't a lot of familiar, faces like the ones that, were surrounding me at home. Culturally, it wasn't a very diverse, country at the time, so I did feel a bit out of place. But generally speaking, growing up in Canada has been an amazing experience, and I love and very proud to be Canadian. My entire family, when we think about the six kids in my family, it was a very busy household. Sometimes I don't know how my parents really did it, but they
Mhm.
managed. We were all very rambunctious, curious minds. And I think at a very young age, regardless of the kind of questions that I used to ask, my curiosity was always very high. My dad always encouraged us to be able to, venture down different paths, be curious, engaged within your community. And so I think a lot of those, values and giving back was also a really big important thing were instilled in me at a very young age, and I continue to develop and act on them as I continue to go through, the different stages in my life. I would say fast forward, I went to the University of Toronto, decided that I was going to find a compromise, my parents wanting me to stay close to home. I ended up doing a joint specialist in poli-sci and economics. I really was much more interested in philosophy and political science. At one point, I think I had thought I was going to go into the Foreign Service. And through my dad's advice and guidance, that quickly became, a path I wasn't going to pursue. And I went into business and software in particular. So I started out early days working at firms that were in the financial services industry, tech companies like Spectre Securities, and others that I think were really such a great opportunity for me because if I started at a bank, I don't think I would have had the kind of exposure to innovation that I ended up having by working at early, stage tech companies and tech companies that ended up being quite successful in the end. I decided to plant my roots within financial services with a tech leaning. So as I continued to progress through my career, I ended up holding both, growth and product roles. And I got a chance to work for some amazing companies that were global. So State Street Bank, which was part of IFDS, International Financial Data Services. Actually, IFDS is jointly owned at the time by State Street Bank and DST. I got to go to, across Western Europe, working with different MDs for each of the countries within that region. And I was very much focused on building the best platform. At the time, it was a record keeping system. So when we talk about record keeping systems in the back office of these environments, it was essentially how to transact every activity that was occurring between a financial advisor that would be selling these products like mutual funds and other investment types to the end clients. And those were the transactions that were flowing through our systems. So anyhow, it was really fascinating for me to be able to go from working with scrappy tech companies to much more established global financial institutions.
So tell me a little bit about Catherine Wheel. You founded Catherine Wheel. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so after I left FundServe, I started to do some consulting work, advising, I would say, with companies that are well established in different industries on their digital innovation strategy. And as part of doing that, I became much more, I would say, just interacting on a regular basis with startups because in that role, I would look at partnering these corporate incumbents in different industries with early stage tech companies. Because we found, obviously, most times that a lot of that innovation, the really interesting things were happening within early stage tech. And that was such a great opportunity to be able to give some of these companies, the uplift that they needed at a time where, large corporate incumbents were really looking for ways to enrich the experience with their end clients and to overall improve the value proposition that they were delivering. So that's how I became closer to a lot of these early stage tech companies. And in the process, they would ask me to come on as an advisor, sometimes also as an investor. And so that's how we started to talk about the genesis of what became the Catherine Wheel. We basically were having conversations with my partners at the time who were also engaged with early stage tech companies and in different capacities. So, Zahir at the time, much more sales, positioning, and product. And then for Philippe Garneau, all on the branding, marketing, and the whole story, telling piece. And so we came together and said, why would, a startup want to have to go seek this expertise advisor, one advisor at a time? Let's give them a platform that was a much more holistic experience where they could get all of this expertise in one shot, but also more importantly, that we were all, integrated in our approach and perspective so that we could give them much more holistic advice. So if you think about that next kind of, milestone in the trajectory of that startup, what's most important, and then how best would we advise them on how to tackle that? And then as a result of, the approach that stemmed from the strategy, we really wanted to make sure that they understood that there were going to be elements of branding that needed to be changed, sales that needed to be impacted,
Mm.
as well as operating models, et cetera. And all of this also continued to, allow them to understand their position in market, but also how best to execute against that roadmap.
So it wasn't just finance. It was just you were kind of telling them, hey, you're missing a bit of here, you're missing a bit of this, right? So you thought it was just finance, but it was actually more than that.
Well, actually, to be honest with you, no, the Catherine Wheel for us never really was about finance. It was much more about what does a startup need and
Mhm.
how best can we give it to them at that appropriate time. And that was really the most important thing for us. It was impact, not so much do we want to give you like a write-up of our analysis? No, let's like really quickly put our minds together and figure out like what is it that you need to succeed. And let's make sure that you've got the right solutions at the table and thinking, right? Because as you can imagine, being a startup founder, there's just so much to consider. So when you are spread
Yeah.
across so many different, aspects of the organization, so operations, finance, legal, HR, it's hard to really appreciate the nuances within each one of those, and also the nuances of the situations that you're dealing with. What am I not seeing that others may see? And that's really I think a good advisor does that, right? But it's great when you have an advisor that is specialized in one area. For us, it was not so impactful. It's going to be much more impactful if I was then, having that conversation with Philippe, who's on the branding side, and I'd say, well, I don't think the market is going to respond well to these following things. This is what the market's looking for based on the target market that the startup was going after. And that thinking blended in with Philippe's to be able to provide a much more impactful, outcome than if Philippe was trying to do it on his own and I was doing it on my own. And so we gave a combination.
Yeah. So different people get to see, yeah, different people get to see different perspectives, and they get to add their, their own input
That's
essentially. You get somebody who's, yeah,
it's
exactly.
almost like they hired like three executives, you know what I mean? That could be hands.
Exactly. I was gonna say.
Yeah, we basically covered, gamut
Yeah.
of things, which really is, it's hard to find that. And I think often when you look at incubators, accelerators, they do their best, but the reality is they're trying to do this in sort of a bespoke way. And then they connect you with a whole bunch of advisors that they have pooled together, are
Hmm.
exceptional people. But the reality is,
Hmm.
if I'm still having a conversation with someone who's an expert in sales, they don't have the benefit of having other thought leaders at the table talking about it, right? And then really coming up with the right
Right.
solution for the problem. And then the other
Right.
piece of it was, yeah, we would invest our time, so a combination of our time and as well as capital that we would put in. We was refer to as dollars and then human capital. So both would go into backing the company.
So were you investing? You were investing in the companies?
Correct. So we were putting actual dollars
Okay.
into the company, and then we would also put in our time in exchange for, an equity stake. And the ones we would pick, is really interesting. Someone asked me what was sort of the criteria. There's a lot, so I won't, bore you with everything that we go through in terms of our due diligence. But what we really prioritized as sort of the final criteria was how willing is the team in taking advice?
Mm,
Because that to
mm.
me.
Because not everybody wants. Yeah.
Yeah, so they say they do, and then when it comes down to it, it's like, are you really willing to, listen and, take it into consideration and evaluate it, or are you really just like, no, I know best. I'm just going to keep going. And I was at an event last night, and someone brought that up, and I sort of chuckled, and I said, yeah, I mean, isn't that the biggest part of it? Like, what's the point of bringing on a board and a group of advisors if
Yeah.
you feel like you
Yeah.
know it all?
Yeah, I think a lot of accelerators today, one of their key judgment factors is, how coachable
Yes,
is this team? Do they seem like they're open for advice, or they just want to do things their own way? Yeah.
that's exactly it.
Yeah. How long were you doing that for? How long were you at the
Oh, the
Catherine
Catherine
Wheel?
wheel we've had for, I want to say close to 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 years.
All
Yeah.
right.
And
And so, yeah. Yeah, go
no,
ahead.
I was going to say we still have the investments in those companies. Like it's not like,
Mm,
much has changed in the sense of our position on it. And it's still very much a for us, in a more of a like a maintenance mode. And so
yeah.
I can connect the dots right now really quickly, but I was tapped by one of our a very dear friend, Robin Tinatis, and also, someone who we would go to with some of the firms that we were helping to consider an investment or to evaluate opportunities for partnership, with firms that they had introductions into. And so he's always been a big, supporter, a lot of help. And he had suggested at the time we were working on a transaction, and he had suggested that I consider buying the firm that was being considered to be bought by this one company that we were working with, and optimize this firm. And this was in the wealth management space. So I sort of chuckled at it at first, and he was like, "No, I'm serious." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I promised I would take a look at it, and I would seriously evaluate whether there was something here or not. So, with that being said, I went into it eyes wide open, had a few calls with leaders of, and owners of wealth management firms, and wanted to just get a handle on how the industry was doing. And I focused on Canada to start, and I found there was something interesting. It started out as being a potential opportunity to acquire a mid-sized firm in Canada. And then, as a part of my plan to optimize that, I came up with the blueprint for Prospera. And
Hmm.
that was when we started to socialize the idea with different executives across different companies. I'm very grateful for the network I have and everyone who was very willing to have a call and listen to the pitch. Are wonderful people, and they gave me honest feedback. And I think many of them ended the call with, "When is this going to be available?" And so at that point,
No.
yeah, I think we have something here. And so we had conversations internally. Rob and I chatted about it, and with our CTO and others, and then we decided that there was something worth pursuing. So we did. we had some incredible people very early on, like Dinesh Maheshwari, who's the former chief technology officer at Grok with a Q. He was very instrumental in giving me the guidance and advice and being a great sounding board for the opportunity at hand. And so we all felt like there's something here, let's pursue this. And that's when we incorporated Prospera AI in February of March 2025. So that is when I officially shifted fully away from the Catherine wheel to focus on Prospera AI and haven't looked back since. I mean, it's been an amazing.
Yeah, it's they're different. I mean, I'm keen to learn a bit more about Prospera AI. It's a completely different, obviously, type of business model, I'm sure, from consulting to tech. So how did you decide this is what I like? I mean, you've never done it before. How did you decide this was a good fit for me? I want to do this. I'm going to lead a tech company. I'm going to lead a tech team. Like, how does one think about that going from consulting to, yeah, I could be a tech founder.
Yeah, well, to be fair to my background, I ran product and growth functions within these large
Okay.
organizations. So I was never leading the tech teams, but the tech teams were part of the overall team structure
Of the
we had
product.
for the
I
product.
think. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I had peers, of course, that ran the tech groups, and we would, obviously collaborate with and make sure that we were advancing on the strategy that my team had set for the company. And so
Hmm.
I was always, from the very beginning, if you go back in time to my days that I was describing at State Street, helping them out in Western Europe, to my time with Citibank or Citigroup in Canada and the US with my peers in the US, all of that was tech centric. So I was always involved, from the ground up, understanding the requirements, capturing the requirements, ideating with clients, the market at large, because we had such a diverse base of clients.
Mm.
And I saw it always as a tremendous opportunity for us as a company, regardless of which of the companies I worked for, to be able to really hone in on what was at play here, what was really the value that we could drive for our clients, and how we would translate that into features and a roadmap for our products. And so that was part of my role. And so I always was very much hands-on. I was curious, again, started out a very curious kid that never ends. We laugh often because if you ask anyone who's ever worked with me, Lina will ask, a million questions.
Well, you need to be pretty, I mean, for somebody to, when you're going that deep and you're really connecting on all these different angles, which for anybody is like, it's not for me. I'm not in that industry. I don't care. Just, but for you, you were kind of, getting into it and trying to understand all the bits and pieces. Did you had, like, you were thinking of doing something, so you were like, this is worth it. I need to be spending more time here.
Actually, no,
Like, I mean, this is not just interest. I need this because something's coming.
I always felt like, you know what, in order for me to feel comfortable with what I'm doing and to bring the best of what I can bring to the table, I need to know things to a certain degree. And that's not for everyone. So for me, it
Mm,
was that level. But also because if you don't
mhm,
understand how the machine is made and what goes into making the
mhm,
machine, how can you really come up with ways to solve your client's problems, right? Because then it becomes sort of too
mm,
abstract. So I think there was enough of an appreciation of what goes into making the machine. But then also
mhm,
you want to continue to foster and create an environment for creativity. And that creativity
of course.
often would have to be abstract. Like you'd have to kind of step away from what you
Yeah,
knew and what was being prescribed to you and seeing where the potential could go. So it was enough of an understanding
yeah.
to appreciate what was there and to appreciate the role of all of my peers, because also the level of empathy, when I talk about empathy in product design, I've always been a big proponent that you need to be able to understand what it's like for your user to do their job. If you can understand that intimately and have yourself be open to hearing them and listening to what it takes, then I think you can build better products.
So for somebody that doesn't know what is Prosper
Mhm.
AI, can you describe what's Prosper AI today for somebody who
Absolutely. Yeah,
has never heard of it?
absolutely. Yeah, we are a company on a mission to provide quality financial advice to the masses, like you just described. And we believe that it is best done through a financial advisor. So we've built a platform that helps financial advisors manage their workflow centered on a very deep understanding of their client. And so when you think about the actual, function of a financial advisor, it is delivering a very, what we believe, a very personal service to their clients. It's their wealth. Wealth, in our opinion, is second to, your health. And so why is it that, we've made strides in healthcare and achieving precision health? We believe today, with where, AI is, that we can actually mirror that on the wealth side and deliver precision wealth. So our view of that is when we think about someone's life, we think about a client and the everyday occurrences that happen within our lives. There are events that occur that an advisor may never understand or know about. Our view is that we need to be able to listen to the natural cues that are coming up in everyday conversations that the advisor is having with their clients. And using our behavioral intelligence model, we can start to help the advisor better understand how their client thinks, reacts, feels, and approaches events in their life. And as they start to understand those things, which we've always put within the context of the conversation. So a client is dealing with, an aging parent. They're dealing with their kid going to university and needing to save for that. They're dealing with an unexpected illness in the family. All of these things have nuances and context that is so important for the advisor to be able to understand. And so what we designed the platform to do was to do just that, and to do that within the context of their wealth journey. So that's essentially what we have set out to do.
There's a human, empathetic kind of approach to it, which I found very interesting. So how does I need an example. I like examples. So give me an example. How is this advisor like, how are they listening to me? How am I giving them my input? How are they learning that I have something coming up, that something bad happened to me?
Yeah. So often what we find is a lot of these conversations are already being had. And even with advisors
Mhm.
that don't have, let's say, a high EQ, they're human and they're absolutely able to understand that when a client leans in and opens up about something, that it is time for them to sit back and listen. And for those that may not understand that, we do believe that our platform will still allow them over time to understand the importance of doing that. And the way that we do that is by making sure that we are bringing forward the insights that we are analyzing through conversations that the advisor is having. So they can have a conversation over, chat, any kind of chat-based service, so text message,
Mhm.
WhatsApp. They can do it over email, transcripts that, may be generated off of a meeting like this one, and a multitude of other forms, right? Some use like a recording device, that they would attach their phone,
Mhm.
etc. So all of that is really amazing data that we will be able to use through our behavioral intelligence model to extract insights. So Ramsey, you're having a conversation with me. I'm your financial advisor. You're talking to me about all these plans that you have with your business, things that you want to do in terms of aspirational goals. All of those goals are really intended to be packaged as part of a financial plan. Often they become transactional. Here's the goal. I want to save $50,000 this year. This is the objective, and purpose for the savings. And here's the timeline. And so you can bucket things in sort of short term, midterm, long term. Well, what about understanding what's behind that? There are cues that Ramsey, you're offering up without you even being conscious that you are in the conversation that we can actually elicit through language-based analysis. So we can start to understand where you have more excitement around something. You may be avoiding, other elements of this plan. And, the advisor really isn't putting a lot of, emphasis on it because how can you, as a human, have a conversation and able to pick up on all the cues in that conversation? It's hard.
It's impossible.
Exactly. Yes. And so the reality is you want that advisor to be present. It's like your doctor. You want your doctor to be present in the conversation. And in
Hmm.
order for them to be
Hmm.
present, they can't be
Hmm.
busy analyzing the conversation. So that's why we
Hmm.
felt this was perfect opportunity for Sophie, our AI companion for advisors, to be able to do that listening and that analysis. And so, where she picks up on the cues and the subtle cues, she can start to weave together across a series of communications indicators about who you are when it comes to the emotional response you have around that particular example. So, let's talk about, if you had an aging parent, what does that really mean? It's not just sadness. Is it mean also anxiety because you're not sure where things are going to go? You need more certainty right now. There are a whole bunch of plans that are now going to be
Is
impacted by that.
is this happening through voice or video, or because it seems to me like for a human to capture that, they need to also be looking at some body language. They need to be like there's more of like a psycho kind of analysis kind of way, which is beyond kind of what you're doing, which is, in finance. But I'm assuming like there are things that you can pick up through video that you can't pick up through audio alone, and there are things that you can pick up through audio that you can't pick up through text alone. So I'm just trying to understand the type of information that you're gathering. Is it through, how are you capturing that data?
Yeah. So it is all text-based to start. So as part of our V1, it's text-based.
Okay.
Think about
Okay.
think about the industry today. This is missing, like in large part. Like we have behavioral science has been around forever, behavioral economics, behavioral finance, there's different kind of, subjects that are extensions of that.
Hmm.
We understand that, often advisors can go through training on emotional intelligence, on how
Hmm.
to read the cues, et cetera. And that's all very good
Okay.
because it's great awareness, right? We believe like all of this really is wonderful because it doesn't make it so foreign. They start to appreciate the value and the applicability of it to the relationships that they have with their clients. Ultimately, it doesn't cut it because, like we said, you can train them on it, but we know that in practice, it's hard for someone to be able to do both things at the same time. So we believe with text-based, communications, lots of rich insight that you can gather from that.
Hmm.
And so it's a great starting point. And it has proven to be the case as we've demoed this our platform to many firms and independent advisors. And the response has been overwhelmingly positive. And we're really happy about that because we are very passionate about creating a world where people are more aware, and we believe that awareness drives to better relationships and ultimately better collaboration and overall service and experience. So, that being said, that is the starting point. However, we have in our white paper definitely mapped out other modalities, like you've pointed out, and those include audio and video. But as a starting point, text is going to be our focus.
Nice. You mentioned that you started this, I think, around this time last year, around March
That's
2025.
right.
I looked at, I mean, it's not very public. You
Right.
have like stealth on your on your
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Why the secrecy?
Yeah, I don't know if it's real secrecy. It's just more of we didn't want to be overt about it and we didn't want to be advertising.
Okay.
I think any
Okay.
startup goes through this first, initial days of a company.
Hmm.
And to be
Hmm.
fair, I think in the first, 3 to 4 months, we were still tinkering with, prototypes. And of course, in this day and age,
Mm.
you can build high fidelity prototypes. It's really exciting what you can achieve. But nonetheless, these were prototypes and we were still testing and iterating and figuring out whether there was something really here of value and an opportunity that we could execute against. And fast forward, we iterated with a group of wonderful advisors that gave us their time and their feedback. And we got to the point that we are today, which is a V1, and we're refining the V1. But it's pretty amazing how far we've come in that period of time. And so for us, it was dual purpose. It was typically the path that most startups take, out of the gate is to be in stealth until you figured it out. And I think given the pace at which things are moving today, we're able to interact with the market more readily than maybe in the past. Startups were able to do, tech startups in particular. And so for us, yeah, it just became a moment to say, do we really need to go and like launch officially? Or do we wait and launch officially, whatever that means, with our first, big client? So that's where we're at. Pretty excited about the momentum we've created and
So
where we're at.
yeah, Yeah, since we're talking, I mean, my next question was going to be, who's your typical client? Who's the client? How do they use your product? Maybe walk me through
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So our ideal customer profile is an advisor who runs a practice with, a handful, it could be a handful of clients to hundreds or even thousands of clients. And the reason
Mhm.
why we have such a range is because we don't believe that our solution is specific or geared towards just size of practice. It's really about helping advisors be able to, like you said, service all their clients like their best clients. And so generally what we found is regardless of the size of the practice, the top 20% of an advisor's business, that kind of 20%, top 20% of their client base, get exceptional service, right? And they're very hands-on with them, they
Mm.
understand them intimately. And then the bottom, 80% still, decent, just not as good as the top 20. So we said, you know what? We're going to make sure that 100% of your client base gets the same level of service. And why? Because now we can automate a lot of this using our platform. And the most important piece that we can actually automate, and not just automate from the standpoint of having the client interact with our platform, but more about how we can take all of this wisdom and knowledge around the client, their behaviors, their wants, their dislikes, how they would potentially respond to certain events, anticipate that, and then appropriately respond to it, the recommendations and advice that Sophie is providing them based on that analysis and understanding. That is really, I would say, game changing because suddenly they're not looking at a screen that isn't intelligent and trying to figure it out on their own or talking to their peers within the firm or their, the associates or administrative staff. They're figuring this out firsthand with Sophie's help. And that allows them to prepare for meetings in a fraction of the time. It allows them to be able to be more present during a meeting. And then post meeting, it allows them to be able to know that Sophie's got everything. She's going to capture everything that came out of that meeting. But more importantly, she's going to capture it in the context of who that client is. They're what we call the client
Mhm.
blueprint. And that client blueprint in our system is really comprised of sort of three overarching buckets of data. You've got your personal information, the financial, as well as the behavioral, and that behavioral, being across every aspect of your financial journey and plan. And then, from the standpoint of, going back to the ICP, so from a user, that's really kind of the user at the end of the day. And of course, the financial advisor is surrounded by other staff at times, and those group, other staff members like the associates and administrative staff can also be users of the platform because when you realize the way their practice is run, everyone is, interacting and collaborating together. But also when you like take a step back and look at the industry at large, we really wanted to, from our standpoint and our go-to-market, is partner with firms that are really in a growth, trajectory. So those firms that are acquiring businesses right now in the market, we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the industry. And so we really want to, do business with those firms that are actively in that process because we do believe it provides, a great trajectory for us, a great sales engine for us. And also because of the value that we deliver, in part, not only have we solved for deep personalization at scale, but we've also been able to
Mhm.
now create inherent scale in practices that don't have it.
Okay. And how do you sell it to clients? What's the business model like?
Yeah, so
How does Prosper make money?
yeah, we sell on a per user license basis, so per month, so per user per month. And so we have two
Okay.
tiers right now, a standard, which essentially allows advisors a certain number of requests per month and access to a certain set of agents. And then we have Pro, which has access to all of the agents that we will have in the platform, as well as the number of requests per month goes up considerably. So both priced to be, in our view, realistic in terms of price points that we're seeing in the market. And so we've tested that, we've gotten feedback, and we think that we've priced it competitively. Value, we think, is exponential, of course, and so over time, as they use it, they get more and more value because there's a compounding intelligence, right? The more communications you feed on a client, the more intimate the knowledge Sophie has of that
Accurate.
client. So yeah, that's
Accurate.
generally
Yeah.
how the structure works today.
Okay. And what's traction look like? Are you guys working with, do you have a lot of clients? Are you just piloting? Are you testing a little bit? Where are you in that?
Yeah, so we've been in active discussions with a number of large firms, so enterprise, sort of size firms, and
Mhm.
banks as well as independent firms, so independent wealth management firms. And we've also been in active conversations directly with independent advisors. Advisors typically, both in Canada and the US, often are still associated with a larger firm. But it was important for us to be able to organically connect with advisors so we could really understand how they run their business, the different, models and approaches. All of that was very insightful data. So we've gathered a pretty strong following. And so we've, yeah, both looking at onboarding individual advisors as well as enterprise firms at this point. And we're hopeful that next quarter we can announce one of those deals.
Nice. Very cool. How big is the team? Who's behind Prosper AI today? Can you tell me a bit about the
For
team?
sure. Yeah, we've got five of us today. So we've got our CTO and my co-founder, Sergio Sanchez, who is such an exceptional technologist. He is, can and do pretty much anything in my eyes. But the thing that really sets him apart is his not only willingness to learn new things and to adapt in different ways. He's not once ever told me something is impossible, which then I just kind of hold at a very high standard.
That's
Yeah,
that's what every leader wants to hear.
exactly. That's right. Yeah. There's always a way for us to figure this out. And I think
Yeah, there's
yeah,
always.
when I thought back to my early days in my career, that was the thing that I wanted to push often on, right? Like if you use the word impossible with me, um, I wasn't going to
Mm,
accept that. So he's just the complete opposite of that. He understands where things can go. If he doesn't, he takes it away and he digs in and learns and how the best way we can
yeah.
approach it. He's
I had somebody, sorry to cut you off. I had somebody on my
yeah,
team once. He had like a phrase. He would always say, "I'll take care of it." And that would bring so much peace to my heart because, things would be going crazy and
yeah,
you just say, "I'll take
yeah.
care
I
of it.
got it.
It's done." And I was like, "Oh,
Such a good
I got it.
feeling.
I'll do it."
Yeah, and when they do, when they are able to take care of it, I mean, what a gift, right? I think it is. He's just that. He's always got my back. We can talk about things, we can disagree about things, we can debate them, but we always get, I think, to the best outcomes possible. I mean, we've achieved so much in a short period of time, and the complexity of the platform that he has built. I mean, when you see the front end, it's intentionally designed in a way to be super intuitive, and it's a chat-based interface. But the reality is that there's so much complexity underneath, and he was able to get that done, with sheer kind of knowledge, but also effort that I think is just exceptional. We've also got James Woodfall, our chief behavioral scientist, who's in the UK. So I'm in Toronto, Sergio's in Bogota, Colombia, and James is in the UK. And James is phenomenal. He comes with like such a fitting background. He was an advisor for, 20 plus years. He had a practice with other advisors working for him and thousands of clients. And he was able to translate that later on when he sold the business into a business that he started, which was focused on training advisors on emotional intelligence. He did uh, have
Okay.
two degrees in psychology, within different areas of the field of psychology and behavioral science, and that is has been just really remarkable for us as a company, because not only do we have someone who understands this intimately, has the academic accolades to back it up, but also has a high degree in terms of standard of, we can't just throw Myers-Briggs and call it a day, like other, he sort of mocks other solutions. He said, no, 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 this has to be evidence-based theory. I was like, got it. I was like, I love this. It's perfect. Because, at the end of the day, you can take, again, something that's so complex and simplify the experience. And that's what we've done because we've extracted what is very rigorous, theory and science behind behavioral observations that we have, and then put that into a representation that is much more practical and understandable to advisors. And that's the key because we want to be able to have that be, applied very easily. And then we've got Fidel Castro, who does our DevOps. He's phenomenal. And then we have Tarek Dejani, who's going to be running our QA.
Nice. And what stage are you guys in? Are you coming out of stealth soon? Are you raising? What's happening today?
Yeah, so we kind of took a pause on raising early days, and we said we just wanted to go heads down and build. So Rob was our first
Okay.
investor as part of this round. We decided to open it up in the fall of last year, and we are just in the process of wrapping things up on the raise. So we're raising a round of 2.5 million on a pre-money of 10. And yeah, that's where we're at with that.
And what do you guys hope to, what does Prospera AI look for you to look in the future? What are you hoping to, where can this go?
Well, I mean, it can go, in our view, in the direction that we feel it already is going, which we want everyone to fall in love with Sophie. We want everyone to derive incredible value from the platform, improve their relationships. If we see advisors, able to service all their clients with the utmost personalization and precision that we believe Sophie can help them achieve, that's we're going to be elated. And we do believe that when you build great products, you have the right distribution channels, right distribution strategy. Inherently, you can also foster network effects, which we think are very much feasible in this space. But also understanding that decisions are made at the top of these organizations, and we're selling to wealth management firms. And so we want to get advisors super excited. So we got to get them excited within these organizations. And at the same time, we've got to establish our relationships at the top and make sure that the executives at these organizations see the value and that we connect with them on that value. Our view is that, yeah, we'll become one of the market leaders in this space. I mean, we're pioneering a new category. That category is precision wealth. And we don't see anyone else doing that today.
I mean, with such a like a very precise model, this could be applied to so many different things. I mean, you never know
Yeah.
it's not just
That's
finance.
a really good point. A lot of people bring that up. We definitely see the possibility of that. Also, just given how we've architected and designed our platform, our behavioral intelligence model is standalone, so it can be repurposed for other industries. But really, right now, we're doubling down and laser focused on the wealth management space. And so, once we conquer that, then we can start having those conversations.
Amazing. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys. This looks like super, super promising. Thanks a lot for coming on, Lina. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for what you guys are doing. You're giving founders an opportunity to share their stories and their journeys, and that's really, really valuable.
Of course, it's a pleasure. Where can people find you? On
On
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, they can email me at lina@myprospera.ai, and they can find us at myprospera.ai. So, yeah, absolutely reach out. Happy to have conversations, and I welcome it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Lina.
Thank you.